Good evening. What is that? Didn't hear you. Ladies and gentlemen, will you please welcome five-time Grammy-nominated artist from Southern California, Ambrosia.
Let me know when you're rolling. Hi, this is Tino, and I was just blown away with Ambrosia. I was blown away at their sound check, and then blown away by their live performance. I'm here with Joe Puerta, the bass player and force really behind Ambrosia, founding member and songwriter. Hi, Joe.
Hola.
Hola. He was telling me an interesting story that Alan Parsons, the great engineer and producer and songwriter and progressive artist, came from the UK to the US because of this local band from San Pedro in 74?
It was 74 when he mixed it. Came out in 75. But it's one of those, you know, there used to be a show on television called Connections, and it showed how things developed. One thing triggered another thing, triggered another thing. Our thing was, there was a good friend of mine. I was in a band when I left high school, where a bass player, a guy named Jim Gamble, was an amazing electrician and sound man. I was playing guitar, and there was two other guitar players, and him on bass. At one point he said, "Joe, you're going to be the bass player, and you buy me 2 speakers, I'm going to start a sound company." So we did that. I bought his 1963 jazz bass, which I still have, played on most of my Ambrosia stuff. And he went to start this great sound company. A few years later, he calls the band up with Ambrosia, and he says, "Look, you guys want to play the Hollywood Bowl?" Man, the Hollywood Bowl, you kidding me? Of course. He said, "Well, there's not going to be anybody there. We just need somebody to test out the sound system at the Hollywood Bowl on a Sunday afternoon." But we said, "We don't care, just to get on the stage, come on." We were 19 years old. Right. Like, great, Hollywood Bowl. So anyway, some Sunday we're on there, Hollywood Bowl, we got a couple of girlfriends, but that's it. And there's this Englishman, who's maybe 50-year-old guy named Gordon Perry. And he had been hired by the Hollywood Bowl to be their sound consultant. We found out later he was the leading classical engineer in probably the world. He had won 5 Grammys for classical recorded interview. He was out there with his dB meters, listening to how loud it was and listening to various sounds as they tested my friend's sound system at the Hollywood Bowl. Suddenly he says, I stopped looking at my dB meter, and I started listening to music, and I found it to be quite, amazing. And he asked us after the things, "Are you classically trained?" Because we were trying to copy some of the band's influences, like Yes and ELP and stuff like that. And so, well, a little bit, but at that point, I don't think I'd ever even seen a symphony. I was just a guy from Harbor City, California. I mean, it was like, starting to love these bands, Yes, and things like that. He said, "Well, you can be my guest anytime you want at the Hollywood Bowl." And so, great, free tickets. Great, sure. We're always up for free. So we started going we'd go to see it, and he would take us backstage after the show and introduce us to Leonard Bernstein and Herbert von Karajan and George Solti. Wow. And all of a sudden, it's like, they all think we're like this amazing, successful band. So Zubin Mehta, who was director of the Hollywood Bowl, he puts on a concert, Gordon puts on a concert at Royce Hall in UCLA, invites Zubin Mehta, and we do this thing where we're doing all this progressive stuff and our other stuff. A year later, Lucas Foss, who's another great classical conductor and writer, needed a rock band for a new, modern classical piece. So a year later, we got to play the Hollywood Bowl with the LA Philharmonic. And from that...
And what year was that, by the way?
This was 1971, I think.
Wow.
71.
Okay.
So a producer there, Steve Goldman, was there. We went in, he said, I really like what you're doing, and he took us into A&M Studios. We did some demos. We actually did a live performance for Herb Alpert, who was head of A&M Records, in that big soundstage that was built for movies by Charlie Chaplin, A&M Studios.
Which is now...
Could you imagine, here we are like 19-year-old kids, nobody in at room except for Herb Alpert and us. And we, you know, Herb Alpert was, you know, an icon, you know.
Jerry Moss.
And Jerry Moss. He wasn't there, but Herb was there. And we went in the studio, we got to do some demos. He didn't sign us. He said basically, your ideas are beyond your execution. We were still trying to figure out what we had in our heads, how to play it. We couldn't really pull it off yet. But anyway, we did these demos. We eventually got signed. But we always kept this relationship with Gordon going. So after we got signed, Gordon Perry, we recorded this album. Gordon Perry came, we were all living in a house in Sylmar, California. He came to the house with an album under his arm. He said, we're getting ready to mix the album. He has this album, he goes, this is the greatest pop recording of all time. The man who mixed this album must mix your album. And we go, what is it? It's an album called Dark Side of the Moon.
Wow.
Do you want me to stop?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. Just flap that in. So anyway, here we are. You know, we're still we're still totally unknown to the world. No one knows who we are. We're actually playing well, I could say the word dyke bar. Playing a lesbian bar to pay after we do our recording because we didn't have enough money in our budget to feed ourselves. So we listened to this album and go, oh yeah, I see what you're saying. This is an amazing sounding record. And so, well, how do we get a hold of it? I says, well, says he works at Abbey Road. Let's call Abbey Road. So, call Abbey Road, and this was the fluky part of it. We call Abbey Road. We ask, is Alan Parsons there? Speaking. And we said, well, Alan, we're a band from LA, and we've got a record. We'd love you to mix. Are you ever coming out to LA? He goes, well, I'm coming out to Los Angeles in a few weeks for the Grammys, because of course Dark Side was nominated for Best Engineered Album. He says, I can probably stop by. And of course, Gordon Perry, being one of the most revered engineers in the world for classical music, gave us some, you know, gravitas, you know, people going, oh, these are, must be somebody. But at this time, we're literally, nobody knows who we are. So he came to our house. We were big in the lesbian world.
How did you guys get that gig?
Oh, we just needed money.
Was that in Sylmar, by the way?
It was in Sun Valley, Valley, California. So it was right up the street from the studio we were recording at. So anyway, he arrives in Los Angeles and he comes up to the house and we're all living there. We're on pins and needles. Alan Parsons is coming here. So we've got the rough mixes, not the final mixes, but just he can hear the material that we're presenting to him to be mixed. And we're all like, what does he think? Alan, what do you think? And he just sat there and goes, this is amazing. And we said, no, what do you really think? He goes, it's fantastic. And meaning he's going to do it. So he says he loved what we did. So he comes back in a few months to mix the album. He mixes the album. And this is the one thing that's really interesting. At the end of the album, we have a song called Drink of Water. And one of the coolest things Gordon Perry did, because he was so tight with Royce Hall, which has a real pipe organ. They didn't have synthesizer pipe organs. I was talking to Gordon one time, and he was recording a pipe organ. And I heard it. I said, Gordon, that's what we need on this song. We need that. And of course, Gordon hooked it up. We went to Royce Hall, and we recorded a real pipe organ on Drink of Water. Well, the interesting about that, too, was that because air has to be pushed through to get a note, you can't play when you hear the track that you're, because we were overdubbing it.
It takes a minute.
You have to
play it.
You have to actually guess ahead of time.
Yeah.
When the part is, so Chris was sitting there going, playing everything slightly ahead, because by the time he hit it, it was a second later when it come out.
Yeah. Wow.
So, but we did it. We pulled it off. Chris did a great job. So anyway, but this song, Drink of Water, had pipe organ, choir. It was this majestic song. And at the end of the album, Alan Parsons, this is a true story, held the phone up to his manager, Eric Wolfson, and said, this is what I want the project to sound like. Alan Parsons' project.
Whoa, come on. That's pretty cool.
So that was from our studio. He was holding up the phone to his manager. This is what it should sound like. That huge. And of course he brought in orchestra, you know, his first album, Tales of Mystery Imagination.
Right.
So when he went to record Tales of Mystery Imagination, his first album, he was in LA still, so he asked us to record the first track. And it was a completely stealth project. No one knew what it was about. No one knew the actual song titles. No one knew what it was really about. They were trying to do it, this secretive thing to make it like when it came out, it was going to be this, here it is. And no one knew what it was until the point it gets released.
That's cool.
So we're in the studio, we're going to cut the first track. He says, I want you guys to cut a track from before I leave. Fine, okay. So we go in the studio, and his manager, Eric Wolfson, wrote this tune. And we go, okay, we're sitting in the studio. He goes, how does this song go? He goes, oh, it's like this. Boom, 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 on the piano. Boom, 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 boom. This went on for like 5 minutes. We're going like, and finally, dun 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 dun. Oh, okay. And we said, okay. I said it filter in. So I said, what's the song about? The song was actually The Raven. It's the first song on the first album. But at the time, because it was so secretive, he couldn't even reveal the name. So he said, it's a song called The Raver. The Raver?
Wait a minute.
And we said, what's a raver? He goes, a raver, that's like kind of like a streetwalker. Oh, well I said, well if it's a streetwalker, shouldn't it have a little bump and grind? So I said it should go, boo-doo-dum, bump-a-bump, do-do-dum, bump-a-bump, instead of just bump, bump,
Yeah,
bump.
yeah.
I mean, if you're paying for a hooker, it's only going bump, bump. That ain't no fun. Give me a little boo-doo-dum, bump-a-bump.
Thank goodness for a little.
Give me some pump and movement. So anyway, so he goes, yeah, that works. So we cut the track, The Raven. And that was the opening track of the first Alan Parsons project.
Okay, you were talking about
The Raven. Okay, are we ready to go?
Yep.
Okay, so anyway, the second album comes out. There's a song called I Break Down. And how's the song go? I break down, bump, bump, bump.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I know the tune.
So Alan said, you know, we stole your bass line. I was like, well, okay.
Oh, man.
That's at least you acknowledged it.
Now, your first album, the vinyl was the best sounding vinyl
we had
ever, right?
there's vinyl collector societies, and Burley was saying, you know, I just went on this Google and some society said the greatest sounding vinyl album ever released was Ambrosia's first album.
And Alan
Because one of the things about it, there's pipe organ on it, there's Javanese gongs, there's balalaika orchestra, there's choir. We threw the kitchen sink at that record. So for people who are aficionados of sonics, and we had some of the greatest people in the world, Alan Parsons, Gordon Perry, and Keith Johnson, who was another friend of ours, Chuck Johnson, who recorded it, is an amazing engineer. We had so many great people helping us, get a great sound. Because we didn't know, first time you go in a studio, you know nothing of audio. You just want to make a record. You don't know that there's ways to make a record sound really good, and there's a way to make a record sound amazing, and all the nuances that these people put together. Like Alan Parsons. When I remember actually meeting Steely Dan when they were coming out the first time, and I was telling him about Alan Parsons. I said, yeah, we were doing automatic double tracking, and they're looking at me like, what's that? Well, it's an English thing where they take off from the playback head, the record head. They use two heads and they delay them with another machine, and you, instead of doubling the vocal with actual two takes, they take your original take, they take it off two heads, delay it,
so
phase it out a little bit,
it's off a bit,
and it's an automatic double track. That was an English trick. We never heard of that before. So Alan came,
and this is all done on the 2-inch.
It's all done.
Hold it right there. 2-inch
Yeah,
tape.
Burley needs it.
The good analog 2-inch.
Open the door, bro. Just bust it. Just kick it.
I think it's over here. Wait.
No, that side.
Yeah, what's that side?
And you were limited to 24 tracks at the time?
Oh, we were on 16 track.
You were getting that with 16 tracks?
Man, our track sheets,
Hey, man, take care of
Burley,
it.
our track sheets look like
Sounded great,
hieroglyphics. I mean,
no, there's like 36 on each channel, and people will be screaming.
You worked with
coming!
16 tracks.
Glockenspiel coming!
No, it was. But the thing also that freaked us out, because we'd never seen this before, Alan Parsons, you know, he was a tape op for many years in England. So we'd never seen people cut tape all the time. But we had all these masters that we'd worked years on. I mean, we'd been over a year on cutting these tracks together. Suddenly he's going, oh, well. And so we would, the thing is, we'd have a song like Time Waits for No One on the first album or something like that, where it'd go from a harmony to a balalaika to a tambourine. It just kept changing that one track, because we didn't have a bunch of other tracks you put it on individuals. But he would mix in sections, and we'd never done that before. We never said, like, here we go, here's the intro. We'd be in the room, we'd be playing cards, and he said, wait there, and when we're done, come in. Okay, here's the intro. How's it sound? Great? Great. Then he'd splice in the next piece, and we'd go to the next section. But he'd cut the tape to the end of that section, mixed through there. So this was all new to us, and you can only imagine, it'd be like seeing if you had a kid or something like that.
Serious?
Yeah, cutting everything up and splicing it together. Well, no,
and then you're like in the waiting room because you can't be in there.
Yeah, we were in the. He was in the control room. We were in the studio playing cards, waiting for him to say, "Come in and listen and see what you think." But I mean, how lucky can we be out of an unknown band out of fucking San Pedro, basically? Our first guy that we get to mix us is Alan Parsons.